Hi, everyone, and welcome back to my podcast. Today, I want to talk about feelings. And I'm talking about our emotions, I'm talking about the sensations in our body as well. When we try not to feel, we're really giving our body the message to express itself instead through disease. We are an energy field that flows from head to toe, and it's meant to flow like a river, just unimpeded. But as soon as we say, "Oh, I don't want to have this feeling," it's like throwing a rock in the river. And we move from ease to dis-ease. And eventually, whatever it is that we're feeling that we've decided not to acknowledge, it'll express itself through the physical body. The disruption at first might just be tension you hold in your body, something you just don't want to acknowledge. But eventually it's going to filter down to the physical. And we want to stop that from happening. That means we have to feel. We have to acknowledge our pain. We have to acknowledge our wounds. We have to be willing to face the things in our lives that are the most unpleasant. And if you've gotten in the habit of burying things and you've buried them deeply enough, you might not even know anymore that what you've suppressed is emotion. It might just be a stiff neck, or maybe you have stomach trouble, or maybe you get a tightness in your chest, or maybe you have trouble clearing your throat all the time, or maybe you get headaches, and you just chalk that down to something physical. But anything that's been a problem in your life for a long time, there's a pretty good chance it started out as emotional. And when you were a little kid, what were the messages you got around expressing your feelings? Were you encouraged? Or were you encouraged to be strong, be tough, and push those things down inside of yourself? Or were you encouraged to only express certain emotions? A lot of little girls were taught it's okay to cry, but they got shamed for showing their anger. A lot of little boys were allowed to be angry, but were told boys don't cry. So when we get those messages from childhood that say there are certain values attached to our feelings, it affects how we express them. If as a little child you express something and somebody tells you that's bad, you're going to end up suppressing that. You're going to decide, I must be bad for having this feeling. And we want to be loved and accepted by our family. So we push that down inside because we want to belong. So if you're angry at an injustice or something that you perceive that way, and you're told that you should be nice and you're not allowed to be angry, that anger has to go somewhere. My grandmother had a saying that anger does more in the vessel it's stored than on whom it is poured. And I think that's true. I think it's the same for grief, for shame, for any kind of pain that we carry. If we don't find a constructive way of expressing our feelings and having them acknowledged by the important people in our lives, we're going to push them down inside. And in some cases, because we also tend to ignore physical feelings, feelings of tension in the body or discomfort, we may not know that we've created a problem for ourselves until disease arrives. So maybe it'll show up as a cancer, maybe it'll show up as a heart attack, maybe it will be some other disruption in the body. And I'm not saying there aren't genetic and physiological factors and environmental factors that create disease, but I do think one of the important factors we have to be willing to look at is how open we are emotionally. Do we process our feelings? I carried a lot of tension in my chest for a very long time. The things I went through when I was younger, the ways I had to be an adult very early in life. I saw my mother through cancer a couple of times from my teen years. And in a lot of ways, I had to grow up very quickly, going through my parents' divorce, going through illness in the family. nobody was really checking in to see how I was doing. It just wasn't what was done back then. People didn't really check in with kids' feelings. So as a kid, you just persevered, you did the best you could. And if feelings weren't acknowledged by other people, you learned not to acknowledge them yourself. So I carried that tension. And eventually, it started off manifesting as asthma, which I had from a young age. It eventually manifested as sarcoidosis. I literally had a wall of growths around my heart. And fortunately for me, I was able to recognize that that was emotional material manifesting physically. I did what the doctors told me to do, but I also worked on what that was emotionally and got to the point where I'm now in remission. And I look on it this way. If at some point I'm out of remission, something else shows up in my body or some other condition, I'm once again going to go, okay, what's the emotional material that needs to be worked through here? It goes hand in hand with seeing my doctor, staying on top of these things. But I always want to look at what is happening emotionally. What am I not aware of that my body's trying to get my attention? I look at it this way. It's a worthwhile approach because it's one more thing you can do along with whatever your doctor suggests to see, is there something there? And I have a really, really easy way for you to find out. What you want to do is stay perfectly still. And if you're used to moving around a lot, maybe you don't meditate, maybe it's really hard for you to sit still, this is probably going to work for you really quickly. You sit perfectly still, and if you already have some sort of condition or discomfort in your body, focus your breathing there. Bring all your attention to that area and breathe into it until you're really connected with that physical discomfort, with that point of tension. Because a lot of times, if we're used to living in our heads and not feeling our emotions, we might first best be able to identify a feeling by feeling it as a physical sensation. So maybe you're mostly in your head, but if somebody kicked you in the shin, you'd know it. So pick up, where are you feeling that physical tension, that physical discomfort? And this is a challenging thing because our society is very comfort-based. As soon as there's discomfort, take a pill, do something to stop that feeling. We're not taught to sit with our feelings, to go into discomfort, to discover if there's something underlying that. So if you sit perfectly still, you breathe into where you're really uncomfortable, maybe it's even painful, and you go as deep as you can into it without moving a muscle, you will feel something emotional. Maybe it will come up as frustration. Might even be frustration at being sick, and anger at the dilemma that you're in, maybe angry at your body for betraying you. Maybe you'll grieve, maybe there will be tears that come to your eyes. Whatever happens, stay perfectly still. That's so you don't disperse the energy. And as soon as you move around, you disperse it and you're not as aware of the experience you're having. Stay perfectly still. Breathe deeply into that experience, into the physical, into the emotional. And at this point, do your best not to analyze. Just be present with the experience you're having. The more present you can be with the emotional and the physical sensations going through you, the less your body has to do to get you to pay attention to those things. Realizations will come. If you sit long enough with a feeling, you'll eventually trace it back to its origin. At first, it might just feel like it's about the condition you're dealing with. But if you sit long enough and you really just pay attention to the feeling, maybe ask yourself, when you first felt that way, it'll eventually get traced back to its origin. And you might find yourself realizing that maybe your whole life there's been stuff you've been holding on to, and maybe now you can finally give yourself permission to feel it, and from there giving yourself permission to express it to somebody you care about, or express it to someone like me You can always book a session with me and we can work on this together so I can hold space while you step into this feeling. Hold space while you share what comes up for you. And because of my psychic abilities, I can also help you. I can trace it back to its origin for you if you can't go there. And you can finally give some peace to the part of you that's held on to that for your whole life. You can finally offer that part of yourself an audience. Care about that part of yourself that got shoved aside to survive your life so you could be what other people wanted you to be. Or maybe you thought you had to be a certain way and you took it upon yourself and you pushed those feelings down. Whatever the cause, if we're to come into full awareness, if we're to be completely conscious beings, we have to be willing to accept all of who we are, all of our emotions, every part of us that we brought into this life, and learn to accept them without judgment. Accept that we have anger, we have fear, we have grief, we have shame. We have all these feelings along with love, joy. We have all these feelings because we're human, and it's all not only acceptable, but necessary to our journey. And as we come to accept those feelings, those parts of us have a chance to become conscious and start to align themselves with the rest of our conscious self. And now we're making better decisions. We have more energy. There's more of us at play. And our bodies can finally get a break because they don't have to express to us anymore the things about ourselves we haven't been willing to acknowledge and receive and accept. So this week, whether you are in pain or discomfort of any kind, or whether you feel completely free of that, try scanning from head to toe, noticing in your body the most noticeable sensation, sitting perfectly still, breathing into that area, and just allowing yourself to go deeper into whatever physical sensation you find there, and then deeper into whatever emotion arises. Just be present with it. We know from quantum physics the mere act of observation creates a material change. If we want our bodies to be healthy, we have to pay attention. Pay attention at the deepest level that we can, so that the information we need for our well-being can be brought to the surface and shown to us. We have all the knowledge we need inside of us. We're connected to universal knowledge as well. We just have to be willing to turn within and pay attention. So when people meditate, they're often looking to bliss out and to feel good. But if you meditate with the idea of just feeling inside of you what most needs your attention, I believe you're going to find that more productive. And that peace that you're looking for, oh, it'll come. It'll come when those parts finally feel acknowledged. Thanks very much for joining me, everybody. I look forward to seeing you next time.